the world paused, literally paused. And in that stillness, millions of hearts raced with anticipation. Just one sentence, one fleeting claim, had managed to shake the foundations of the most scrutinized monarchy in the world. "We were married 3 days before the wedding." Those were Meghan Markle's words during that infamous Oprah interview, words that instantly became a cultural flashpoint. People gasped, argued, tweeted, and shared memes for months. Some believed it immediately, holding on to the idea of a secret fairy tale wedding. Others scoffed, insisting it was impossible, that the rigid protocols of the British royal family simply would not allow for such an event. And now, decades later, the Archbishop of Canterbury has finally spoken. The silence has ended. The truth, at least as far as the Church is concerned, is crystal clear. There was no legally recognized private wedding. The story that captured global fascination? It never happened. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about it for a moment. A royal wedding is already a spectacle. The gowns, the pageantry, the meticulously curated public appearances, all of it is a symbol of centuries-old tradition. Every movement, every photograph, every vow is weighed against history, law, and protocol. And yet here was a claim that upended all of that. A private ceremony, hidden from the public eye, known only to a few. Could it have been true? Millions wanted to believe it. Millions shared in that romantic notion of secrecy, of intimacy, of defying protocol for love. But now, the voice of the Archbishop, a man whose authority in these matters is absolute, has shattered that dream. And the implications are staggering. Why does this matter so much now? Because this is not merely a tale of a wedding. It is a story about truth, trust, and the careful dance between public image and private life. Meghan and Harry are not just any couple. They are symbols, both loved and vilified, and their every statement carries weight. When one of the world's most powerful religious figures challenges a claim made by them, it ripples far beyond palace walls. Suddenly, history books, news outlets, and social media feeds are forced to recalibrate. And for fans and critics alike, the question becomes impossible to ignore. If this claim was false, what else might have been? The Oprah interview was iconic for so many reasons. It was emotionally charged, meticulously produced, and presented in a way that made the world lean in closer. Meghan described the wedding she claimed had happened 3 days prior to the official ceremony with Harry. She recounted it with such vividness, such passion, that it felt real. Viewers could almost see the setting, hear the soft whispers of vows, feel the intimacy of a moment that should have been sacred. And the world believed. That belief was not just based on words. It was based on emotion, on the story being told so convincingly that logic almost seemed irrelevant. People wanted to believe in the hidden fairy tale moment. They wanted to see Harry and Meghan as rebels against tradition, finding their own path to love and commitment. But here's the twist that no one expected. The Archbishop has now stated unequivocally that this private wedding was neither legally binding nor recognized by the Church. In other words, it did not exist in any formal sense. It wasn't a matter of he said, she said. It was a matter of law, history, and ecclesiastical record. And in saying this, the Archbishop has cast a long shadow over everything that was believed, shared, and celebrated. The implication is subtle, yet damning. The story may have been exaggerated, manipulated, or outright fabricated. And that changes the narrative completely. Suddenly, what was once an intimate and charming detail of their lives becomes a question of credibility, honesty, and the very nature of their public storytelling. This revelation also invites a deep look at the intricate web of royal tradition. The British royal family operates under centuries of formalized rules, both secular and ecclesiastical. Every marriage must be conducted in accordance with these laws to be recognized officially. That means witnesses, registration, and adherence to church protocols. The idea of a secret wedding that bypasses all of this, while romantic on the surface, simply cannot exist without breaking centuries of procedure. When Meghan described a private ceremony, it was understood emotionally as a personal, meaningful act. But the Archbishop reminds us that legality and spiritual recognition are not optional. They are foundational. Without them, no marriage is recognized by the state or the Church. That distinction might seem technical to some, but it is crucial in understanding why this revelation is seismic. It's also important to consider the human element. Harry and Meghan's lives have been under an unprecedented microscope. Every move they make, every statement they utter, is analyzed, debated, and sometimes weaponized. In such an environment, claims of private, secret moments take on enormous weight. They are not just personal anecdotes. They are public statements with ripple effects across media, culture, and even international perception. And when the Archbishop challenges one of these claims, the stakes become enormous. Suddenly, the discussion is not just about a single event, but about trustworthiness, judgment, and the consequences of storytelling in the age of global scrutiny. For fans and critics alike, the timing of this revelation adds another layer of drama. It comes years after the Oprah interview, a moment many believe to be definitive. It comes after books, interviews, and countless analyses have cemented the narrative of a secret wedding in public consciousness. And now, the truth, or at least the official truth, throws all of that into question. This is not merely an academic debate about royal protocol. It is a confrontation with reality versus narrative, law versus emotion, fact versus perception. Consider for a moment the emotional weight of this. Millions of people felt a personal connection to the idea of this secret ceremony. It was intimate, romantic, and rebellious. It gave the couple a sense of autonomy in a world where they are constantly under surveillance. For many, it humanized them in a way that official ceremonies cannot. But the Archbishop's statement challenges that connection. It asks audiences to reconsider everything they believed. And when a figure of his authority speaks, the emotional resonance is undeniable. Fans might feel disappointment, betrayal, or confusion. Critics might feel vindicated. And the couple themselves? They are faced with a global conversation that questions their honesty in one of the most personal aspects of their lives. But what exactly did the Archbishop say? And what does it mean for the broader story of Harry and Meghan's marriage? These are questions that cannot be answered lightly. His statement goes beyond mere clarification. It touches on credibility, intent, and perhaps even legal standing. It asks us to look at the couple not just as public figures, but as individuals navigating a treacherous intersection of love, duty, and media scrutiny. It forces us to confront a fundamental question. Can emotion ever substitute for fact in a world so obsessed with the truth? As this revelation spreads, reactions are pouring in across the globe. News outlets scramble to cover it. Social media explodes with opinions, memes, and heated debates. Historians and royal experts weigh in, offering context and analysis. Every detail of the Oprah interview is being re-examined. And in the midst of it all, one thing is clear. This is not a small story. It is a moment that could redefine public perception of Harry and Meghan, challenge the narratives they have cultivated, and provoke an unprecedented reevaluation of one of the most famous royal weddings in history. So what comes next? How will Harry and Meghan respond, if at all? Will the public forgive, forget, or continue to dissect this revelation for years to come? And what does this mean for the larger story of royal protocol, media manipulation, and the complex interplay between private life and public expectation? These questions are more than rhetorical. They are the threads that will unravel the story we are about to explore in depth. And this is only the beginning. The Archbishop's words are a key that unlocks an entire labyrinth of intrigue, contradiction, and drama. They invite us to peel back the layers of public storytelling, personal narrative, and historical expectation. They hint at secrets that may have been obscured by charm, celebrity, and media spin. And most importantly, they set the stage for revelations that could shake the very foundations of everything we thought we knew about this couple. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Did you remember where the world collectively gasped? That unforgettable night when Meghan Markle sat down for an interview that would redefine how we see the British royal family? Millions tuned in, captivated not just by the glamour or the exclusive access, but by the rawness of her words. "We were married 3 days before the wedding," she said. And just like that, the world was hooked. But did anyone stop to think about what she was really claiming? Did a private royal wedding even make sense, legally or traditionally? Or was this a story meant to tug at hearts, to make us root for them, to rewrite their narrative? The Oprah interview was meticulously produced. Every camera angle, every pause, Every look had been calculated to create intimacy and drama. Meghan was calm but assertive, carefully measured yet emotionally stirring. Her voice trembled just enough to convey vulnerability, yet remained firm enough to signal authority. The backdrop of the soft lighting, the tastefully decorated set, and the weight of Oprah's reputation combined to create a sense of authenticity. Viewers didn't just watch. They felt as though they were part of a secret, being let in on something deeply personal. But was it a secret? Or was it a narrative designed for maximum emotional impact? The reaction was immediate and intense. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended across platforms. Memes were created, each one emphasizing the drama, the shock, the audacity of the claim. Some celebrated the couple's bravery, seeing in them two people asserting control over their love in the face of centuries of tradition. Others questioned the timing and logic, pointing out the improbability of a secret wedding amidst royal scrutiny. Could anyone really pull that off without leaving a trace? And yet, the claim lingered in public consciousness like a shadow, a story too tantalizing to ignore. It wasn't just the words themselves that had people talking. It was the context, the subtext, the story behind the story. Meghan framed the claim not as an isolated anecdote, but as part of a larger narrative about her and Harry's struggle against a system that often seemed to resist their individuality. She described moments of isolation, scrutiny, and pressure that added layers of sympathy to the tale. And the audience bought it. They wanted to buy it. The very idea of a private wedding, intimate and unrecorded, appealed to something deep in human nature. The desire for love to triumph against odds, for romance to exist beyond the reach of authority and spectacle. But let's pause for a moment and think critically. A wedding in the royal context is not just a ceremony. It is a legal and religious contract, a ritual steeped in centuries of precedent. Vows, witnesses, registration, and ecclesiastical oversight are not mere formalities. They are requirements. Without them, no marriage is legally binding. No private arrangement, no matter how heartfelt, can substitute for official recognition. So when Meghan claimed a secret ceremony had occurred, she was, intentionally or not, challenging not just public perception, but legal and religious protocol. That's a bold move, and bold moves in royal circles rarely go unnoticed or unchallenged. The Oprah interview was also strategically timed. By presenting this claim in a carefully produced, globally broadcasted interview, Meghan framed it within a story of agency, resilience, and defiance. The couple was not simply recounting a personal anecdote. They were asserting a narrative, one in which they were active participants shaping the story of their lives. It was cinematic. It was theatrical. And, as it turns out, it was immensely persuasive. But with persuasion comes scrutiny, and once the Archbishop spoke, the story's veneer began to crack. Audience reaction was varied and highly polarized. Some were moved to tears by the notion of a private, sacred moment shared away from cameras and protocol. They imagined Harry and Meghan, hand in hand, exchanging vows in a quiet chapel, a brief escape from the glare of history and expectation. Others were skeptical. How could such an event happen without witnesses, records, or official acknowledgement? Could the claim have been a misinterpretation, a misstatement, or a calculated embellishment? The truth, as the Archbishop would later confirm, is far more complicated and, in many ways, far more damning than anyone anticipated. Critics pounced immediately. Tabloids ran headlines questioning credibility, some even framing the claim as deceit. Legal experts were consulted to explain how impossible it would be to execute a secret royal wedding while adhering to the law. Social commentators dissected body language, tone, and facial expressions, suggesting that certain cues indicated fabrication or exaggeration. Meanwhile, loyal fans dug in their heels, defending the couple and framing the skepticism as jealousy, tradition-bound bias, or anti-American sentiment. The internet became a battlefield of belief versus doubt, truth versus perception. It's essential to understand the psychological and cultural factors at play here. Meghan and Harry's story resonated globally because it offered hope, drama, and a sense of intimacy. Viewers were not just consuming information. They were experiencing a story that aligned with their emotions, desires, and biases. People rooted for the underdog, for love against the odds. The idea of a secret wedding fit neatly into that narrative. And that is why the Archbishop's revelation is so disruptive. It challenges not just facts, but deeply held beliefs and emotions. The Oprah interview also strategically highlighted disparities within the royal household. Meghan referenced moments of exclusion, judgment, and misunderstanding that framed her as the wronged party in a complex family dynamic. This contextual framing made the private wedding claim seem not only plausible, but also psychologically necessary. A way for the couple to assert their agency and protect the sanctity of their love against external pressures. In other words, it was not just a story about a wedding. It was a story about survival, control, and emotional sovereignty in the face of institutional scrutiny. As the world absorbed these layers, millions were drawn into a narrative that felt intimate yet extraordinary. It was a tale of forbidden romance without the barriers of tradition, a story where love triumphed quietly before the public spectacle. And yet, for all its beauty and allure, there was a gaping question mark. Did it actually happen? Could it have happened? And if not, why tell the story at all? The answer, as the Archbishop's later statement confirms, lies not in speculation, but in authority. His words did more than clarify. They dismantled an entire construct. The private wedding, as described in the Oprah interview, was never legally binding. It was never recognized by the church. It was a narrative moment, a story shared with millions that, in the eyes of ecclesiastical and legal authority, never existed. And that raises profound questions about the couple's credibility, intentions, and the blurred line between public storytelling and factual truth. Even more compelling is the timing of the Archbishop's statement. Years after the interview, after countless analyses, books, and discussions, a single authoritative voice has challenged a claim that was accepted, debated, and internalized worldwide. It's a moment that forces audiences to reconsider their assumptions, to question the difference between narrative charm and verifiable fact, and to confront the unsettling possibility that a story designed to inspire could also mislead. So, what happens when millions of people have built emotional investments around a story that doesn't exist? When admiration, sympathy, and belief collide with legal and religious reality. The fallout is dramatic, unpredictable, and ongoing. The Oprah interview, once thought to be definitive, now serves as a case study in perception, media influence, and the complex dynamics of truth in celebrity culture. Every reaction, every meme, every debate now carries the shadow of the Archbishop's confirmation. The event described simply did not happen. And yet, despite all of this, questions remain. Did Harry and Meghan believe their own narrative? Was it a calculated embellishment for the public? Or was it an emotional truth that didn't require legal recognition to feel real? These questions hover, unresolved, inviting further investigation and speculation. They are the hooks that will pull viewers through the rest of this story, chapter by chapter, revelation by revelation. But just as the world was grappling with these contradictions, the narrative expanded. It wasn't just about whether the wedding happened. It was about perception, trust, and the intricate dance between public image and private life. Historians, legal experts, royal commentators, all weighed in, dissecting every word, gesture, and timeline. What emerged was a labyrinth of context, emotion, and consequence, showing that a single claim, seemingly innocuous at first, could ripple through centuries of tradition and millions of lives in ways few could have predicted. And the most shocking part? This was only the beginning. The Archbishop's words had set off a chain reaction, uncovering questions about credibility, intention, and even the ethical boundaries of storytelling in the public eye. What the world had assumed to be a romantic anecdote now revealed itself as a catalyst for controversy, debate, and deeper scrutiny. But what came next would plunge the royal family, the media, and the public into a level of intrigue that no one anticipated. And it would all start with the details hidden in plain sight during that unforgettable Oprah interview. The moment the Archbishop of Canterbury finally broke his silence, the world leaned in. Everyone had been waiting, some with bated breath, others with skepticism. After years of speculation, rumors, and dissecting every frame of the Oprah interview, a single authoritative voice had stepped forward to set the record straight. And what he revealed didn't just clarify. It shook assumptions, challenged narratives, and sent shockwaves through royal circles and public discourse alike. There was no secret wedding, he said. What they described didn't happen. Just like that, the delicate story that millions had embraced as a fairy tale was called into question. The weight of those words was immense. This was not gossip, conjecture, or hearsay. It was the official position of the church, delivered by the very man who presides over royal ceremonies and maintains centuries-old ecclesiastical authority. For those who had clung to the idea of a private ceremony, it was a gut punch. For critics, a vindication. And for Harry and Meghan, it raised a litany of questions about perception, intention, and public narrative. Let's pause and consider the gravity of this. A royal wedding is not just a personal milestone. It is a historic, legal, and spiritual event. The Archbishop is responsible for ensuring that every union adheres to both church law and royal tradition. Every vow, every signature, every ceremony is meticulously documented. So when he says that a private wedding didn't happen, it isn't merely a semantic correction. It is a declaration that the event, as described, had no legal or ecclesiastical standing. There are no records, no witnesses, no recognition. In the eyes of the church, the story simply does not exist. The media reaction was instantaneous and intense. Headlines splashed across screens worldwide. Archbishop shocks public. Meghan and Harry's secret wedding was fake. Did they lie under oath? Royal fairy tale crumbles. Social media erupted with a mix of outrage, disbelief, and disbelief-tinged humor. Twitter threads stretched for miles dissecting the statement, analyzing every word, and speculating on motive. Memes proliferated, each one dramatizing the tension between the beloved narrative and the Archbishop's unequivocal words. For the first time, millions of people had to confront the possibility that a story they believed in emotionally might never have happened legally, or at all. But what made the Archbishop's words so potent wasn't just what he said, it was what he didn't say. His statement was measured, deliberate, and laden with implication. He did not accuse Harry or Meghan of lying outright. He simply clarified the legal and ecclesiastical facts. But in doing so, he left room for interpretation. And interpretation is a powerful tool in the court of public opinion. The suggestion was clear. The narrative shared in the Oprah interview does not align with recognized reality, leaving audiences to grapple with why such a claim was made and what it means about credibility. This revelation also casts a harsh light on the mechanics of storytelling itself. When Meghan described the alleged private wedding, millions of viewers accepted it as truth, or at least as a symbolic truth. The charm, the intimacy, the emotional weight of the story made it feel real. But the Archbishop's words remind us that emotional resonance is not the same as factual accuracy. A story can touch hearts without touching the law, and that distinction is crucial when evaluating the consequences of public statements made by figures whose every word carries historical and legal weight. It's worth exploring why the Archbishop chose this moment to speak. Timing is everything in royal communications. By waiting years after the Oprah interview, he allowed the narrative to settle into public consciousness before stepping in with a definitive statement. The effect is magnified. The revelation is not just a correction, it is a dramatic interruption, a wake-up call that challenges the stories we hold dear. And in the age of social media, timing is everything. The longer a narrative circulates unchecked, the more entrenched it becomes, and the more shocking it is when authority intervenes. Moreover, the Archbishop's statement implicitly addresses the tension between personal narrative and institutional reality. Harry and Meghan have consistently framed themselves as individuals navigating oppressive systems, asserting autonomy in the face of tradition. The secret wedding claim fit neatly into that narrative, portraying them as courageous, romantic, and defiant. Yet the Archbishop's clarification exposes the gap between narrative and institutional recognition. It highlights a fundamental truth. No amount of personal storytelling can override centuries of legal and ecclesiastical procedure. The personal and the institutional, it seems, cannot always coexist harmoniously. The broader implications of this are staggering. Consider public trust. Harry and Meghan's claims have shaped not only perceptions of themselves, but also the public's understanding of royal life, privilege, and protocol. Millions have internalized the story, empathized with the couple, and emotionally invested in their narrative. When an authoritative figure contradicts that story, it forces a reevaluation not only of specific events, but also of credibility, judgment, and the integrity of public communication. The ripple effects touch everything from fan support to media coverage, from historical record to social media debate. It's also critical to analyze the tone of the Archbishop's statement. He did not speak in anger, nor did he attempt to shame or ridicule. His delivery was calm, factual, and measured, a stark contrast to the emotional intensity of the Oprah interview. That contrast itself is striking. On one hand, you have a carefully orchestrated narrative designed to elicit empathy and admiration. On the other, you have a sober, authoritative declaration that cuts through emotion with clarity and precision. The juxtaposition amplifies the dramatic tension and invites audiences to question which side of the story holds true authority. Audience reaction to the Archbishop's words has been equally layered. For some, it is vindication. They feel confirmed in their skepticism, relieved that the Church has clarified the record. For others, it is disillusionment. They may have embraced the private wedding story as a symbol of intimacy, love, and defiance against a rigid institution. For these viewers, the revelation challenges not just a claim, but the emotional connection they forged with the couple's narrative. And for Harry and Meghan, the challenge is clear: navigating a world where personal storytelling and institutional authority are now at odds. What makes this chapter of the story even more compelling is the human element behind the statement. The Archbishop is not just a figurehead. He is a custodian of centuries of tradition, legal precedent, and religious authority. His words carry weight precisely because he occupies a role that bridges the sacred and the institutional. When he clarifies that a private wedding never occurred, he is not merely correcting a detail. He is defending the integrity of an entire system that underpins the monarchy. This is about more than a single event. It is about maintaining the credibility of the institution itself. And yet, for all its authority, the statement is not the end of the story. It raises questions rather than answers them fully. Why was the claim made in the first place? Did Harry and Meghan believe it themselves? Or was it a strategic narrative designed for emotional impact? How will public perception shift in the wake of this revelation? These questions create tension and intrigue, fueling speculation, debate, and curiosity. They ensure that audiences remain engaged, desperate to know more, hungry for every new development. The Archbishop's intervention also prompts a re-evaluation of the Oprah interview itself. Every frame, every pause, every emotional beat is now cast in a new light. What was intended to convey authenticity might now be viewed as theatrical or manipulative. What once seemed intimate now appears questionable. And this reinterpretation is amplified by the global scale of attention. Every statement is replayed, dissected, and analyzed anew, creating a cycle of curiosity and reassessment that keeps audiences glued to the narrative. In effect, the Archbishop's words have transformed a story about a private wedding into a complex narrative about authority, trust, narrative control, and public perception. They force audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about storytelling, the power of emotion, and the fragility of belief. They raise the stakes, inviting further exploration into motives, consequences, and the broader context of royal life under unprecedented scrutiny. But what makes this chapter truly riveting is what comes next. The revelation doesn't just stop at the private wedding. It opens the door to deeper, more uncomfortable questions about credibility, intent, and the intersection of personal narrative with institutional authority. It challenges the very lens through which we view Harry and Meghan, and it sets the stage for revelations that may be far more consequential than any wedding story alone. And just when you think the Archbishop's words are the final chapter on this matter, the narrative twists once again, hinting at deeper tensions, historical parallels, and implications that no one could have anticipated. But what came next would force the public, the media, and the royal family itself to grapple with questions that went far beyond the wedding. And the answers could change everything we thought we knew about this couple. Did you ever stop to wonder what actually makes a royal wedding official? Most of us see the spectacle, the gowns, the pageantry, the crowds, the glittering crowns. We watch, we cheer, we marvel. But behind the pomp and circumstance lies a strict framework of rules, laws, and traditions that govern every union in the monarchy. And it's within this framework that the claim of a secret private wedding must be scrutinized. Could Harry and Meghan have conducted a legally binding, recognized wedding in private? The answer, as the Archbishop's statement makes clear, is no. But to understand why, we have to dive into the often complex, sometimes arcane world of royal marriage protocols. Royal marriages are not like typical civil ceremonies. They carry layers of legal, religious, and historical significance. For centuries, these unions have been meticulously recorded, ensuring both the continuity of royal lineage and compliance with the Church of England's stringent requirements. Every detail matters. The location, the officiant, the witnesses, and the vows themselves must adhere to exacting standards. These standards are not arbitrary. They are enforced to protect inheritance rights, titles, and the monarchy's public legitimacy. A deviation from protocol isn't just frowned upon. It could render a marriage legally void, spiritually unrecognized, or both. Let's start with the legal framework. In England, all marriages must be registered with the state to have legal effect. This includes both civil and religious ceremonies. For royals, there is an added layer. The royal consent requirement under the Royal Marriages Act of 1772, replaced in 2013 by the Succession to the Crown Act. This law requires descendants of King George II to seek the sovereign's consent before marrying. Without it, the marriage is legally null, and any claims to titles or succession rights may be jeopardized. In other words, even if Harry and Meghan had privately exchanged vows, without proper authorization and registration, their marriage would not exist in the eyes of the law. Then there's the ecclesiastical dimension. The Church of England, as the state church, has precise rules for sacraments, including marriage. A wedding must be conducted by a licensed minister in a recognized church or chapel. The ceremony must follow liturgical guidelines, and official records must be kept. Witnesses are required, vows must be spoken aloud, and the entire process must be documented. These regulations exist not to stifle romance, but to ensure clarity, legitimacy, and continuity. They create a historical record that protects the institution, the couple, and the monarchy itself. Without compliance, the union cannot be considered sacramentally valid. Now consider the royal tradition. For generations, royal weddings have been public, highly ceremonial, and meticulously planned. They are events of state, signaling alliances, continuity, and legitimacy. Every detail, from the design of the dress to the seating arrangement, is scrutinized, not just for aesthetic reasons, but to uphold centuries of precedent. A truly private, secret ceremony would be a radical departure from this tradition. It would not only bypass legal and religious requirements, but also subvert public expectations and historical continuity. That's why the Archbishop's statement is so definitive. The idea of a secret legally recognized wedding simply doesn't fit within the framework of royal and ecclesiastical law. But there's more nuance than simply rules exist, therefore it couldn't happen. Royal marriages, while heavily regulated, have occasionally bent the rules. History is peppered with clandestine ceremonies, secret unions, and disputed claims. Take, for instance, Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson. Their marriage caused constitutional upheaval and abdication. Princess Margaret faced restrictions on her suitors. These examples illustrate that royal protocol is not infallible, but deviations are rare and usually controversial, often with far-reaching consequences. They remind us that the monarchy balances personal desire with institutional necessity, and when those lines blur, the fallout can be dramatic. In Harry and Meghan's case, the alleged private wedding supposedly took place 3 days before the public ceremony. On the surface, it seems plausible, intimate, discreet, romantic. But plausibility is not legality. Without witnesses, registration, or clergy authorization, such a ceremony has no legal or sacramental recognition. It may have felt real to the participants, and it may have been emotionally significant, but in the eyes of law and church, it simply does not exist. The Archbishop's words confirm this. The narrative may hold symbolic meaning, but it cannot replace formal recognition. Consider the practical challenges of organizing a secret royal wedding. Royal residences are heavily monitored, security is omnipresent, and private movements are meticulously documented. A ceremony conducted outside of official channels would risk exposure, legal complications, and public scandal. Even if the couple had intended secrecy, the logistics would have made it nearly impossible to achieve without leaving verifiable traces. The Archbishop's clarification, therefore, does not merely refute the claim. It exposes the practical impossibility of executing it within the rigid structures of monarchy. The importance of this extends beyond legalities. Royal protocol exists to protect public trust. When a couple claims a secret wedding, they are not just recounting a private anecdote. They are challenging institutional authority, public perception, and historical record. Millions of people have internalized the narrative, emotionally invested in it, and shared it widely. By clarifying that the wedding was never legally or ecclesiastically valid, the Archbishop restores the boundary between personal storytelling and institutional truth. This is about more than ceremony. It is about preserving credibility, both for the monarchy and for the Church. It is also worth noting the psychological dimension. Harry and Meghan's narrative, including the private wedding claim, aligns with a broader story of autonomy and defiance. They position themselves as navigating a rigid system, asserting control over their lives, and creating intimate moments shielded from public scrutiny. Emotionally, this resonates with audiences. It humanizes them, makes them relatable, and paints their choices in a sympathetic light. Yet the Archbishop's statement disrupts this narrative, creating tension between perceived autonomy and institutional reality. The tension is palpable. How do you reconcile personal truth with legal and religious fact? Furthermore, the clarity provided by the Archbishop sheds light on the symbolic nature of the alleged private ceremony. While the ceremony may have held personal significance, the distinction between symbolic and recognized events is crucial. In royal and legal terms, symbolism cannot substitute for official procedure. Without formal recognition, vows remain personal, not binding. This nuance is central to understanding the broader controversy. The Oprah interview presented the story as a moment of triumph and intimacy. The Archbishop reframes it as a narrative without legal or ecclesiastical weight, inviting audiences to reassess their assumptions. The reaction from experts, historians, and royal commentators underscores the significance of this clarification. Legal analysts explain the impossibility of bypassing registration and consent. Historians contextualize the claim within centuries of royal tradition. Clergy emphasize the requirement of witnesses, licensed ministers, and recorded vows. The consensus is clear. The secret wedding claim does not align with historical, legal, or religious standards. The Archbishop's statement, therefore, serves as a touchstone, grounding public debate in authority and fact. And yet, the story continues to captivate. Why? Because the intersection of love, secrecy, and monarchy is irresistibly dramatic. The tension between personal desire and institutional constraint creates a narrative that is both compelling and controversial. Audiences are drawn to the drama, the stakes, and the implications. They want to know not just what happened, but why it happened, how it could have happened, and what it says about the people involved. The Archbishop's statement amplifies this curiosity, creating a new layer of intrigue. As we navigate these protocols, one question emerges. Why tell the story at all? If a legally recognized wedding never occurred, why present it as though it did? Was it a moment of emotional truth, an attempt to assert intimacy in a public life under scrutiny, or a strategic narrative designed to shape perception? These questions are central to the unfolding drama and set the stage for deeper exploration into motive, consequence, and the broader impact on public trust. The layers of this story are profound. On the surface, it is about a wedding that never legally existed. Beneath the surface, it is about credibility, narrative control, emotional resonance, and institutional authority. The Archbishop's statement does not merely clarify a procedural detail. It reframes the entire story, inviting audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about truth, perception, and influence. But just when you think the intricacies of protocol explain everything, the story deepens. There are nuances, historical precedents, and insider accounts that further complicate the narrative. Secrets, whispers, and contradictions linger beneath the surface, hinting that what the Archbishop clarified is only part of a much larger, far more dramatic picture. And what comes next will reveal just how high the stakes are, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for the monarchy, the Church, and the millions of people who have believed in this story for years. But what came next would uncover contradictions, hidden motives, and unexpected consequences that no one could have anticipated. Have you ever wondered how a single phrase can ignite a global frenzy? For millions, it was just 6 words. We were married 3 days before the wedding. But those 6 words from Meghan Markle during the Oprah interview sent shockwaves across the world, prompting discussions, debates, and disbelief. Did it actually happen? Could it have happened? And if not, why say it at all? This claim, simple on the surface, is layered with emotion, intent, and controversy, and dissecting it requires a meticulous examination of dates, witnesses, circumstances, and royal precedent. Let's start with the timeline. The public wedding, held at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, was meticulously planned and covered by the media, with every detail documented in both official records and countless photographs and videos. Invitations were sent months in advance. Security measures were extensive. The ceremony followed centuries-old tradition, with witnesses, clergy, and legal documentation ensuring its legitimacy. Now, imagine trying to insert a private wedding into this already structured schedule 3 days prior. Where would it have taken place? Who would have officiated it? Were there witnesses, even a handful? The logistics alone strain credibility, and yet millions imagined that it had occurred in secret, somewhere quiet, intimate, shielded from public eyes. To understand the claim, we must analyze the statements themselves. Meghan's words were delivered with a mixture of nostalgia, intimacy, and gravity. She didn't just assert that it happened. She described it as a meaningful moment, a personal commitment shielded from the glare of tradition. And therein lies the tension. Emotionally, the claim resonates. Logically and legally, it falters. Without registration, without the church's sanction, without witnesses recognized by law, the private ceremony holds symbolic value, but no legal or ecclesiastical weight. The role of witnesses is critical in dissecting this claim. In a legally recognized wedding, witnesses serve as a safeguard, affirming the validity of vows and documenting the union. In the case of a private ceremony purportedly held 3 days before the public wedding, the question arises: who was present? Were these witnesses credible, and were their accounts ever recorded? Here, the claim begins to unravel. No credible witnesses have come forward. No documentation exists. And the Archbishop's statement underscores the impossibility of such a ceremony achieving legal or spiritual recognition without these fundamental elements. Next, consider the officiant. The Church of England mandates that licensed clergy must conduct the ceremony. A private wedding, as described, would require a priest authorized by the Church. The lack of any record of such officiation further undermines the claim. The Archbishop, as the ultimate authority in these matters, confirms that no such clergy-sanctioned event occurred. This is more than a technicality. It is the linchpin that separates narrative from reality. Without it, the alleged wedding cannot be recognized by law or faith. Another angle to examine is the motivation behind the claim. Why present a story that, while emotionally resonant, lacks legal or ecclesiastical validity? Some analysts suggest it was a narrative strategy, an attempt to cultivate intimacy, sympathy, or admiration from the public. Others argue it may have been an emotional truth, a personal moment that felt real to the couple, even if it lacked official recognition. Perhaps it was both, a blend of emotion and narrative strategy, designed to reinforce a broader story of autonomy, love, and defiance against institutional pressure. The 3-day timeline itself is also instructive. Why 3 days? Why not 1 day, 1 week, or a month? In storytelling, numbers carry weight. They provide specificity, lend credibility, and create a sense of authenticity. 3 days is specific enough to feel concrete, yet vague enough to be unverifiable. It creates the illusion of detail without providing evidence, allowing audiences to fill in the gaps with imagination and emotion. This is part of what made the claim so compelling, and why its refutation by the Archbishop is so destabilizing. Let's also examine the cultural and psychological impact. Millions around the world had already embraced this narrative as a testament to personal agency, love, and rebellion against rigid tradition. The idea of a private wedding offered a fantasy of intimacy, a secret shared only between the couple, untouched by the public eye. It humanized them, made them relatable, and positioned them as romantic figures navigating a world that sought to constrain them. For many, the story was more than fact. It was an emotional truth. Disproving it challenges not only the specifics of the event, but also the emotional narrative that audiences had invested in so deeply. Moreover, the claim intersects with broader themes of trust and credibility. By stating that a secret wedding took place, the couple invited audiences to believe in a reality that deviates from legal and traditional norms. When the Archbishop intervened, he didn't merely correct a detail. He called into question the reliability of a narrative that had been accepted worldwide. This raises profound questions about how public figures navigate truth, perception, and narrative control, particularly in a hyper-scrutinized context like the British monarchy. The reactions from media, fans, and critics further illustrate the power of the claim. Media outlets initially treated it as sensational but plausible. Social media erupted with speculation, admiration, and debate. Critics scrutinized timelines, logistics, and precedent. Meanwhile, fans clung to the narrative, weaving it into the larger story of Harry and Meghan as modern, autonomous figures challenging centuries-old conventions. The divergence of opinion underscores the tension between emotional resonance and factual verification, a tension at the heart of this story. It's also important to recognize the interplay between personal narrative and institutional authority. By claiming a private wedding, Harry and Meghan were asserting a personal truth that conflicted with the established legal and religious framework. The Archbishop's statement reasserts the primacy of institutional recognition. Emotional truth cannot replace legal and ecclesiastical fact. This is more than a technical point. It speaks to the broader challenge of balancing personal storytelling with public accountability, a balance that is especially fraught for figures living under constant scrutiny. Even historians and royal experts weigh in on the implications. Many note that while personal, symbolic ceremonies may occur, they are not legally binding unless conducted according to established protocols. In other words, the alleged private wedding might have been a meaningful moment for the couple, but it could not have constituted a legal or ecclesiastical marriage. This distinction is critical for understanding both the narrative impact and the legal ramifications of the claim. And yet, despite all the evidence and analysis, the claim continues to captivate. Part of its power lies in its ambiguity. It is emotionally compelling, legally refutable, and historically improbable, a combination that makes it irresistible for discussion, debate, and speculation. Audiences are drawn to the tension between what they want to believe and what authority confirms. This tension drives engagement, fuels curiosity, and ensures that the narrative remains alive, even in the face of authoritative refutation. Finally, the three-day wedding claim sets the stage for broader consequences. It is not an isolated anecdote. It is a thread that connects to questions of credibility, narrative strategy, and public perception. By examining this single claim, we begin to see patterns in how the couple communicates, how narratives are constructed, and how authority figures respond. The implications ripple outward, affecting not just the perception of a wedding, but the broader story of Harry and Meghan's relationship with the monarchy, the media, and the public. And just when it seems the story cannot deepen further, new questions emerge. If the private wedding claim is refuted, what does that say about other claims, narratives, or anecdotes the couple has presented? How do audiences reconcile emotional truth with institutional fact? And what hidden layers of motive, strategy, and consequence might lie beneath statements that, at first glance, seemed innocent or purely personal? But what came next would unravel more than just the wedding story. It would reveal consequences, legal considerations, and public reactions that no one could have predicted, and it would push the royal family, the media, and millions of viewers into uncharted territory. Could a claim about a wedding that never legally happened have real-world consequences? At first glance, it might seem like a minor discrepancy, an emotional anecdote blown out of proportion by the media. But when it involves a member of the British royal family, personal storytelling intersects with law, protocol, and public accountability. Every word, every claim, every narrative carries weight. And now, with the Archbishop of Canterbury clarifying that no legally binding private wedding occurred, the legal implications and potential royal consequences come sharply into focus. Let's begin with legal reality. In England, For a marriage to be legally recognized, several conditions must be met: proper registration with the state, authorization from the sovereign if the couple is in the line of succession, presence of licensed clergy for religious ceremonies, and appropriate witnesses. Bypassing any of these steps renders a marriage legally invalid. Therefore, even if Harry and Meghan conducted a symbolic or private ceremony, without these essential steps, the law does not recognize it. It is a statement with significant ramifications because it touches on inheritance rights, succession eligibility, and official recognition of the union. Consider the Succession to the Crown Act of 2013. Under this act, members of the royal family who are in line for the throne must obtain sovereign consent to marry. Without it, the marriage is void in the eyes of the law, and any claims to titles or succession rights are imperiled. While Harry is sixth in line and Meghan is not in the line of succession herself, the law still underscores the importance of legal recognition for royal unions. A claim of a secret wedding raises the question: if the ceremony lacked consent or official recognition, could it have inadvertently caused legal complications? The mere possibility has serious implications, even if only hypothetically. The legal perspective also intersects with civil liability. In some jurisdictions, making public claims that are demonstrably false could invite scrutiny, though proving malice or intent is challenging. For public figures like Harry and Meghan, whose lives are continuously under media examination, the stakes are amplified. Every narrative released to the public is evaluated for accuracy, consistency, and potential repercussions. While it is unlikely that there will be formal legal consequences from a single claim of a private ceremony, the question of credibility is central. In the eyes of the law and public institutions, repeated claims inconsistent with verified facts can erode trust and create complications for contractual, philanthropic, or public-facing engagements. Beyond legal mechanics, there is the spiritual and ecclesiastical dimension. In the Church of England, marriage is both a sacrament and a legal contract. A private ceremony conducted without clergy authorization or proper documentation lacks both recognition and sanctity. The Archbishop's statement reasserts this principle and, in doing so, emphasizes that symbolic gestures, while personally meaningful, cannot substitute for official recognition. For a royal couple whose every action is scrutinized, this distinction is critical. Emotional truth cannot override institutional law. The consequence is not only procedural but reputational, affecting public trust, historical record, and the credibility of the couple's narrative. The fallout does not stop at procedure. It extends into the realm of royal protocol and consequences. The monarchy operates on a delicate balance of tradition, authority, and public expectation. Any deviation from established norms is consequential. A claim of a secret wedding, even if emotionally compelling, challenges that balance. It raises questions about transparency, respect for tradition, and the boundaries between private life and public duty. The Archbishop's clarification forces the monarchy, the public, and the couple themselves to confront these questions. The consequences ripple outward, touching relationships within the family, public perception, and historical narrative. Consider the broader implications for titles, honors, and ceremonial participation. While Harry and Meghan's public titles and roles have already been a subject of negotiation and adjustment, claims that contradict historical and procedural fact can complicate these matters further. For instance, participation in official events, recognition in historical records, and even representation in legal documents could be influenced by narratives that do not align with reality. The perception of authority, credibility, and respect for institutional rules is as significant as the legal recognition itself. Public trust is another critical factor. The royal family functions as both an institution and a symbol. Citizens, subjects, and the global audience invest in the monarchy not only for spectacle, but also for stability, continuity, and ethical precedent. When a high-profile couple makes a claim that is subsequently contradicted by authoritative sources, public confidence is shaken. The perceived discrepancy between narrative and reality has implications for how future claims, appearances, or statements are received. It forces audiences to ask, can we trust what we are told? And in the case of Harry and Meghan, this question becomes especially potent given their complex relationship with media and the monarchy. The consequences also extend to media and public scrutiny. Once the Archbishop clarified the facts, news outlets globally scrambled to adjust coverage, historians revisited the timeline, and social media erupted with speculation. Headlines ranged from accusatory to analytical, with some suggesting the couple had intentionally misled the public, while others framed the discrepancy as an emotional narrative misinterpreted by audiences. The effect is a recalibration of public discourse, with previously held assumptions now under intense scrutiny. In this environment, every claim, past or future, is filtered through the lens of credibility established or undermined by the Archbishop's words. Let's also examine the interpersonal dynamics within the royal family. Claims that contradict legal and ecclesiastical recognition can strain relationships. Members of the monarchy who adhere to tradition may view such claims as a breach of protocol, a disregard for precedent, or a misrepresentation of family history. Internal tensions may arise between personal expression and institutional loyalty, creating friction not just in perception but in actual family dynamics. This is particularly relevant for Harry and Meghan, who have navigated a complex web of media scrutiny, familial expectation, and public visibility. Furthermore, the legal and royal consequences intersect with financial and philanthropic matters. Public perception of credibility influences everything from book deals to charitable endeavors. If a narrative is perceived as misleading or fabricated, trust erodes among partners, donors, and collaborators. In a world where reputation carries both symbolic and practical currency, the stakes are immense. The Archbishop's clarification, by refuting the private wedding claim, has implications not only for history but also for ongoing and future endeavors that rely on public confidence. The situation also sparks ethical questions. Is it ethical for public figures to present a personal narrative that contradicts institutional records, even if the intention is not malicious? Should emotional truth be considered separately from legal and procedural truth? These questions are particularly potent when the figures involved are members of a globally recognized institution. For Harry and Meghan, the ethical calculus is complicated by the dual realities of personal autonomy and public accountability. Their narrative choices reverberate far beyond their private lives, influencing public trust, historical record, and institutional integrity. And yet, despite the clear legal and procedural implications, the human element cannot be ignored. The couple's emotional experience, their perception of intimacy, and their desire to control their story are real. The private wedding, even if not legally recognized, may have represented a meaningful moment for them. Here lies the tension between personal significance and institutional validation, a tension that fuels both public fascination and controversy. Audiences are drawn to this tension, engaging with the narrative as both drama and case study in credibility, ethics, and authority. The Archbishop's clarification, therefore, is a turning point. It does more than correct a factual discrepancy. It reframes the narrative, sets boundaries between personal storytelling and institutional authority, and exposes the potential consequences of conflating emotional truth with legal reality. It challenges audiences, the media, and the couple to navigate a complex web of perception, legality, and legacy. And in doing so, it raises a critical question. What happens when narrative, law, and emotion collide in the public sphere? But the most dramatic implications are yet to unfold. Beyond the legal, ecclesiastical, and reputational consequences, there are social and cultural reverberations that touch millions of people who invested emotionally in the story. The private wedding claim, once accepted, is now under scrutiny, forcing everyone, from royal watchers to casual viewers, to reconsider not just the event, but the intentions, credibility, and narrative control of those who tell it. And what comes next will pull back the curtain on reactions inside the palace, the media, and the global audience, revealing tensions, secrets, and consequences that no one could have anticipated. But what came next would expose fractures, spark debate, and set the stage for revelations that could redefine public perception of Harry and Meghan forever. When the Archbishop's statement broke, the media frenzy was instantaneous. Headlines flashed across screens around the world. Archbishop shatters secret wedding claim. Royal fairy tale crumbles. Did Harry and Meghan lie to millions? The combination of celebrity, royalty, and controversy created the perfect storm. Social media exploded with opinions, memes, and speculation. Every platform became a stage for debate. Every news outlet scrambled to cover the story, and millions of people engaged in what became an unprecedented global conversation about truth, narrative, and authority. The speed at which the media responded was staggering. Within minutes of the statement being released, journalists and commentators had dissected every word, every nuance, and every possible implication. Traditional outlets, from the BBC to CNN, framed the story in both factual and sensational terms. Headlines questioned credibility, motives, and the potential fallout for the royal family. Pundits debated whether the couple had intentionally misled the public or whether this was a simple misunderstanding amplified by emotion and perception. Social media, as always, intensified the story. Hashtags like #SecretWedding and #ArchbishopSpeaks began trending worldwide, creating a viral conversation that spanned continents. The role of social media in this media madness cannot be overstated. Millions of users shared clips, quotes, and commentary, often without context, amplifying both outrage and fascination. Memes flourished, mixing humor, sarcasm, and incredulity, reflecting the emotional roller coaster that audiences were experiencing. Some mocked the notion of a secret wedding, others defended the couple, and many simply expressed disbelief. The immediacy and reach of these platforms meant that the Archbishop's statement was no longer confined to traditional news cycles. It became a global, interactive debate, with every viewer participating as both audience and commentator. But this wasn't just about social media virality. It was also about narrative framing. Each outlet, each platform, framed the Archbishop's statement differently, creating competing versions of the story. Some framed it as a definitive refutation, emphasizing authority and law. Others highlighted the human and emotional aspects, suggesting that the couple may have experienced a symbolic moment that didn't meet legal standards. Still others sensationalized the controversy, implying deceit or drama. The multiplicity of narratives created a kaleidoscope of interpretation, making it difficult for audiences to separate fact from emotion, reality from perception. The rapid spread of information, and sometimes misinformation, created both opportunity and chaos. For journalists and commentators, the story was a chance to analyze, speculate, and draw connections to broader themes: royal protocol, media manipulation, celebrity influence, and public trust. For the public, it was a chance to engage directly with the narrative, to express support or criticism, and to feel part of a conversation that transcended borders. The dynamic was unprecedented. A private statement by a religious authority triggered a global conversation that merged fact, opinion, and emotion in ways rarely seen before. It's also worth examining the tone of coverage. Some outlets adopted a celebratory approach, framing the Archbishop's words as a revelation that clarified the historical record. Others leaned into controversy, using charged language like scandal, deception, and lies. The tonal diversity reflects the broader challenge of reporting on figures who are simultaneously public personalities and symbols of historical institutions. Harry and Meghan's narrative, already controversial, became a lightning rod for debate about truth, trust, and perception. The global reach of the story amplified its intensity. In the United States, media outlets analyzed the cultural significance of the secret wedding claim, connecting it to celebrity culture, personal branding, and narrative construction. In the United Kingdom, the story had deeper resonance, implicating historical precedent, royal protocol, and national identity. Across Europe, Asia, and beyond, audiences engaged with the narrative as both spectacle and inquiry, creating a worldwide dialogue that spanned borders and time zones. Social media ensured that every comment, analysis, or meme contributed to a continuous feedback loop, reinforcing engagement and amplifying controversy. The media response also highlighted the interplay between narrative and authority. The Archbishop's statement did more than clarify fact. It reasserted institutional control over the story. Yet in the age of social media, institutional authority is filtered, contested, and reframed by the public. This creates a tension between official truth and public perception. News outlets are caught in the middle, tasked with reporting accurately while also responding to viral narratives, trending hashtags, and audience engagement metrics. The result is a media ecosystem where fact and emotion coexist in tension, each influencing the other in real time. Fans and critics amplified this tension further. Some online communities rallied in defense of the couple, framing the Archbishop's statement as overly rigid or dismissive of emotional truth. Others embraced the clarification, arguing that the narrative was misleading and that the public deserved transparency. Debates ranged from civil discourse to heated arguments, highlighting how deeply people were invested in the story. The emotional stakes were high because the narrative touched on more than a wedding. It symbolized autonomy, love, defiance, and credibility. The media served as both amplifier and battleground for these conflicting interpretations. The media frenzy also revealed patterns in public engagement. Stories that combine celebrity, authority, and controversy tend to attract rapid attention, but the Archbishop's statement added a layer of institutional weight that elevated the narrative above ordinary gossip. Audiences were compelled not only to react, but also to interrogate, analyze, and participate. Engagement metrics soared, with articles, videos, and social media posts receiving unprecedented traffic. The global conversation became both a reflection of public curiosity and a driver of continued attention, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that sustained interest over days, weeks, and even months. Interestingly, the media response also underscores the power of narrative control. Harry and Meghan's claim had initially dominated the story, framing the public perception of the private wedding. The Archbishop's statement disrupted this control, forcing media outlets to adjust coverage, reinterpret previous reporting, and address the discrepancy between narrative and fact. This shift demonstrates how authority can intervene in public storytelling, but also how audiences, once invested, may resist recalibration. The tension between narrative dominance and institutional correction became a defining feature of the story's media life cycle. Furthermore, the media frenzy revealed the cultural significance of Harry and Meghan's story. It is not merely about a private wedding. It is about how personal narratives intersect with institutional authority, public trust, and global attention. The reaction of journalists, pundits, and audiences reflects a broader fascination with how truth, emotion, and authority collide in the modern media landscape. The secret wedding claim became a lens through which millions examined not only the couple's credibility, but also the nature of narrative, perception, and influence itself. Even beyond the headlines, the media madness affected how other narratives surrounding the couple were received. Every book, interview, or public appearance was now viewed through the lens of the Archbishop's statement. Analysts revisited prior claims, historians re-examined timelines, and audiences questioned the reliability of previously accepted stories. This ripple effect demonstrates the enduring power of authority to reshape narrative landscapes, even in a media environment dominated by viral content and decentralized commentary. The media frenzy also amplified emotional stakes. For supporters, the clarification threatened a cherished narrative of intimacy and rebellion. For critics, it confirmed suspicions of embellishment or manipulation. The polarized response fueled continued coverage, commentary, and speculation, ensuring that the story remained alive and evolving. Audiences were not passive. They were co-authors of the media narrative, shaping perception through engagement, reaction, and reinterpretation. And yet, despite the intensity, the story was far from resolved. The Archbishop's clarification clarified one point, but it opened the door to countless others. How did the royal family react privately? What were the long-term reputational consequences? How would this influence future narratives about the couple? The media frenzy had created